no, hang on. I'm going to shut off my space heater now that we're on.
I mean, you don't have to.
How's this? I'm trying something new. Does this sound all right where I'm at?
I just lost you.
Oh, hello?
Yeah, I can't hear you at all.
Okay, hang on.
Now I can.
You can hear me now?
Yeah,
Are you recording?
I am.
Okay, cool. I was going to clean my desk to be able to find room and put those CDs away. And this is a sign of how old I am. But then I'm like, oh, some of these have so many records, and I don't remember what order they came out in. And my shelves are not like, there's not like a blank spot sitting there because they've either slidden down or moved over. And then, so I was like, well, I'll just look at the year on the back of them or on the disc. But my eyes are going so bad that I'm just like, fuck this. If I just slide them over, I'll deal with it later.
I went to the doctor, the eyeball doctor, and I have to get bifocals for the same reason.
Are bifocals different than glasses? Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Everything's falling apart.
This is fun.
Oh man, look at my life.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! No. Don't start this.
This is Relatin Dudes To Jazz. I don't remember what episode. I don't know that it's important. It's been a long time. My name is Nathan. And on the other side there is Robert.
It's me.
Yeah, I think June of 2019 was the last time we did this, maybe. We have a lot to catch up on. Way back in the fall, Robert convinced me to take over the editorial duties of his professional wrestling fanzine, The Atomic Elbow. And in return, I turned over the editorial duties of my whatever zine, Soda Killers, to him. I think it went pretty well. What do you think, Robert?
I definitely had a lot of fun doing it. It was nice to not write about wrestling for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in September, by the way.
Okay,
I just looked at the calendar. September 2019 is when both of those issues were published. I thought it went well. I had a lot of fun doing it.
That's like one of my favorite issues of Soda Killers. It really was. I really liked it.
Oh, you.
I was nervous, as I kind of explained to you when we first started talking about doing this, about doing an all wrestling thing, because I just sort of haven't been into wrestling a lot for a while now. And so I just didn't know how that was going to go. And I was nervous about actually addressing that in the zine, because I didn't want anybody that picked it up to feel like they got, ripped off or tricked. So I decided to sort of steer away from that, other than just mentioning it a little bit. But what's kind of funny is it sort of got me back into it. Because I mean, of course I had to watch, I mostly watched older stuff. And now I've found myself sort of being into wrestling again, although not very verbal about it.
Are you going back and watching the NWA Wildside stuff?
No. I could. I have. But years ago, I got rid of a ginormous box of VHS tapes that I had filled up with the weekly NWA Wildside syndicated show that would play in Minneapolis at like 3 or 4 in the morning on Saturday night, Sunday mornings. So I don't have a lot of it around anymore. A couple years ago, I reached out to Bill Behrens. Is that his name?
That is his name.
I actually, when I was getting rid of those VHS tapes, I tried to get a hold of him to see if he wanted them, just in case. He never responded, but a couple years later, he responded, and he's like, let me send you some stuff. And he sent me like 4 or 5 DVDs of like their big shows, like some of their early on bigger shows, like not the weekly TV, but... So I have that. Sometimes I watch a little bit of it, but no.
It's so weird to me that you were watching that, because it's weird when things like that are local to you or to me, and people in Minnesota were watching. I mean, I know that it was broadcast, but it's I don't know. It just seems really foreign, like a local thing. It's like when you find out that what you consider to be a local band, people in other towns have heard their records or whatever. It's weird.
Mm-hmm. I feel that way about the Dillinger 4 sometimes. Even the Replacements, in a way. I get kind of weird when people like call the Replacements the Mats, and they're not from here. I don't think that matters, but it's a weird thing with me. And somebody had written a story about the Dillinger 4 a year or so back that was not from here, and like how important a band they were, and how they just all that kind of stuff that is true. But part of me was like, this isn't your band. This isn't for you. How do you even know about these guys? So, do you think you'd ever do another issue of Soda Killers?
Absolutely. In a second.
Cool.
It was.
Do you want to tell people what? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was way more fun for me than writing about wrestling, which is, I mean, look, I think I'm very honest with the sort of waxing and waning of my interests to people who want to talk about it. And I've been doing the scene every 4 times a year for every year for the past 8 years. And sometimes you got to burn a field and let it sit for a season so that it'll grow back a little more fertile, because I think I'm hitting that period. I think that the wrestling pasture has to lay fallow for a little while. And, which isn't to say that I'm done doing it, but I don't think, I really don't think there's going to be 4 issues of the Atomic Elbow in 2020.
Do you see yourself doing something different?
I kind of feel obligated to, not that I consider myself to have a readership or whatever, because I know there are people who read my stuff, and I really, really appreciate that. But my obligation really stems from the fact that I've been doing this for so long that it would feel weird if I wasn't working on something. And this is the work that I know how to do. And I which isn't to say that I want to, write something and publish it just for the sake of publishing it. I want it to be good. I want it to be thoughtful, and I want it to be sort of well put together, but I don't know what it's going to be at this point. And I'm kind of leaning into not knowing right now, which is an overly poetic way of saying that, I'm just watching karate movies on TV instead of writing every night. But that's at least the thought process behind it, which may or may not be true. I may just be trying to convince myself that that's the thought process behind it. But I mean, if that's the case, then it's just as real as if that were actually it, I suppose.
For anybody that doesn't know what Robert did with the Soda Killers 24, went through a box of cassette tapes that he had laying around and worked his way through them in sort of, I'd call it an interpersonal manner, which is not different from what a lot of the tape reviews and Soda Killers are like, yet was done differently. Do you think I described that right? I think
you were very kind in that you did not call me out for straight up stealing your gimmick.
No.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's accurate, because a lot of these things, people know what Young MC's Stone Cold Rhymin' sounds like. It's been out for 75 years. And, a lot of these other things that I wrote about, I mean, I'm sure people have heard about. I don't have that, my tastes don't run that esoteric, but, I when I write about wrestling, I try to use writing about wrestling as a springboard to not write about wrestling. And so I tried to use these tapes in a box to not write about those tapes in a box. And whether I was successful or not, well, you'll have to buy a copy of Soda Killers 24 and find out. But
that's right. You can do that at theatomicelbow.bigcartel.com underneath the back issues link, I believe.
That's right. It's there. But I feel like, we're overly concentrating on what I did with your thing, but what you did with mine, I think, was equally as impressive, because you were able to take your own sort of personal aesthetic and transfer that over to this very limited and narrow subject matter. And it was interesting for me to read something put together by somebody, and I know you had a lot of contributors, but you wrote the majority of the issue, and you designed and laid out and published the whole thing. And so it was interesting to take that aesthetic and that sort of feeling of what you do, where you don't have any limitations on what you put in there, and narrow it down to this one thing and put something together based on that. And I think it retained the sort of feeling of your work while, being a very limited subject matter like I normally work with.
That's really nice to hear. Mostly I'm just happy that you think that, because that's exactly what I was going for. I, of course, wanted to put my own little spin on it, but I did not want to ruin your brand, so to speak.
I don't think that's possible.
And there's things that you do in the Atomic Album that I really like the tape reviews that are normally at the end, and the stuff you do with Ed.
We hate school, but we love rock and roll.
Yeah, where they write about all wrestling-related music. So that part was really fun for me to do. So thanks. I'm glad that we did that. I would absolutely do another issue of Atomic Elbow down the road. You can find Atomic Elbow number 31 at hotdogdays.cartel.com. We both put out new issues of our respective zines since then, too. Maybe we'll get to that at the end. But I don't know if you know this, Robert. We have some reader mail.
That's mind-boggling to me, but let's get into it.
Okay, so these go back quite a ways, because we hadn't done this in a while. I occasionally, I don't know about you, but people will reach out to me and say, "You guys got to do that again. I really like it." And say, "Yeah, we're trying."
I can tell you that does not happen to me.
Okay, so here is the first one. This is from David, who says he lives in Nova Scotia. Dudes, he addresses it, which I don't know. I think that's pretty clever. Love the show. It speaks to me and my experience growing up. I think that we must be around the same age. I had a question for you. Is there a band or artist that you think deserves a present-day critical reevaluation? Someone that you liked a lot, or someone you hated or were indifferent to, but now feel another way about? Sorry, I know it's kind of a vague question, but I'm confident you'll come up with something. Thanks, and keep up the good work, David.
I'm trying to think of one that goes both ways. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I ignored as a younger person that I've come back around to. Whole genres, in fact. I didn't pay attention to prog stuff until probably 99 or 2000, the early 21st century, when I was working with a guy who was into that kind of stuff and sort of learned about it from him. And so there's whole genres of stuff that I ignored or wrote off. But I'm also trying to think of something that I was really into that just absolutely doesn't hold up, because in a way, I think that's more interesting to think about, because there's so many artists that I invested myself in, and these were my things. This is what I was into. And I'm trying to think of one that just sort of fell apart and doesn't hold up now. And I'm having trouble doing it. But what about you?
It occurs to me that I feel like what you said about playing catch up is what I've been doing most of my life. I feel like maybe I didn't really know about, or wasn't as involved and aware of all of this stuff at the time that it was happening. I feel like my scope was really limited, and I've just been sort of always playing catch up.
Something that I have learned very recently that is so empowering and feels so good to me is to tell somebody that you don't know what something is. Because I was always scared of that. I was always scared of not fitting in, of not seeming like I knew what all the cool bands, all the cool artists, all the cool skateboarders, all the cool whatever it was. I had to know everything about all of them all the time, or somebody would know that I wasn't cool. And now just owning the fact that there's a lot of stuff I've just never heard of. I'm open to hearing about it and maybe even experiencing it, but it's only very recently, and I'm saying this as a middle-aged man, that I've been able to be okay with hearing about something and saying, look, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what that is. I don't know who that is. And that was a big step for me. Mm-hmm. And I know we're steering wide of the question, but that was something for me that took a while to get to that point. And now that I'm there, every time I tell somebody that I have no idea what they're talking about, it just kind of feels really good.
I feel like it's part of being people of a certain age. That's the idea, right? You get more comfortable in your, not necessarily your physical skin, probably just the opposite, but you get comfortable with who you are and less of a filter and less trying to impress people. So I feel that too. I can think of one that I've thought about, a critical reevaluation, if you will. I often grab a CD off the shelf when I'm going to go for a drive, and I grabbed a Pearl Jam CD. I think their fourth album. As I was listening to it, I was thinking, when this band first came out, like, they were the thing, like everybody. They were praised, heaps and heaps of praise upon them, and they were part of this new wave of bands that would eventually become alternative and start a whole new thing and kick out the glam metal and take classic rock radio away and replace it with some new, I guess, sort of exciting thing for young people in the early 90s. But then a little bit later, of course, the backlash came, and there was, and maybe you fall into this category, but there was a large group of people that were just like, no, that band is absolutely terrible. And like, they would not cover them in alternative press and things like that. And then I kind of started to fall into that too, especially as the albums went on and on. I was like, I can't keep up with this band anymore. And maybe they're not that good. But now, listening to it again a million years later, and of course, just realizing, like we were saying, that I don't have to be like, I don't feel like being embarrassed about stuff anymore. I'm like, well, actually, maybe they're pretty good. Or maybe I'm thinking mostly about Eddie Vedder.
I don't know if I can come around that hard on Pearl Jam. It left me cold. And I think as somebody who is into punk rock music and into that scene, I was expected maybe to have a sort of vehement opinion about them. And I was expected to absolutely loathe them. But that was one of the earlier instances of just being like, that's not really for me. But I guess I get it. But for me, I think recently, and I just thought of this while you were saying that, because what is a conversation if not listening to someone while you're waiting for an opportunity to say what you want to say? I have recently really come around on late 90s, early 2000s radio alternative. And I realized this at a wrestling show. There's a wrestling show here that takes place at a brewery. And I have a friend who wrestles or a couple of friends who wrestle for this promotion. And when I'm waiting for them to finish up and come out, I'm standing around outside watching them take down the ring. And every time they close the bar, they play Semisonic's Closing Time. Mm-hmm. And I realized that is an incredibly good song. Like, that song just rules. And so I was working on something, I can't even remember what, and I just played that video on YouTube and let the YouTube algorithm go and play everything else that it wanted to play. And so I got to hear Lit, and I think Counting Crows, Jimmy Eat World, like all of that stuff from 99 through maybe 2005, 2006, that was that sort of radio alternative stuff. And it really hit me in a way, I'm not going to go out and buy the Lit album, but it really hit me in a way that I was enjoying it way more. And I wasn't listening to the radio in the early 2000s, so, that's probably part of it as well. But I definitely thought, this stuff's pretty good. And I don't think I would have thought that if I had Yeah, if I had been listening to the radio regularly when that stuff was out.
Mm-hmm. 2 more emails here. Robert and Nathan. I really like the show. I feel like we're pretty similar people. God, that one almost starts off the same way. You're both seasoned zinesters, and I'm working on my first one. Wondering if you could answer a couple of questions. A, how conscious of waste are you when you produce your zines? And B, have either of you considered publishing them online or in PDF form? Thanks. Oh, and Mike Watt, he had it right. Flannel shirts rule. Ha ha. Take care, Deborah. I could take a lead on this one.
Yeah, go for it.
How conscious of waste are... Well, so that was a thing that because my zines are done with a lot of physical labor, scissors, glue stick, photocopying. That means you go through a certain amount of trial and error when trying to get something to look right. And also when you're cutting words out and then glue sticking them onto another piece of paper, that you're automatically creating paper waste. And so for years and years, that was something I was really conscious of. And I still do to some extent, but people have mentioned this before. Somebody once said that reading an issue of Soda Killers is like both looking into the past of Soda Killers and the future of Soda Killers because of the repeated images that you find in the background behind the words and such. Because what I did for years, and I still do to some extent, is any copies that I ran that were mistakes or anything that I was like an image I was sort of workshopping with different contrasts on a photocopy machine, I saved all of those rather than putting them in the recycling, and would then just reuse them as the background images to future issues. Not so much anymore because I've honestly gotten better at it, but for a really, really long time, that was kind of how I did it. And I would have just these giant manila envelopes filled with mistakes that I would just reuse. So I was very conscious of that for a long time. And recently I started trimming the edges off of my zines with a paper cutter. It looks nicer when it's sitting on the table, but it does create a little more paper waste. So yeah, that's my answer to that one.
I think when you make a zine, you're making trash.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I mean that's harsh, but you could say the same thing about putting out a record or buying a bicycle. I mean, everything that you consume in the literal or metaphorical way is going to be waste. And I mean, I try to be conscious of that as well. I do all my layout on a computer now. I used to do the cut and paste stuff, but I don't know if I have the time to do that. I did a cut and paste layout for the cover of issue 30, and that was fun. I really enjoyed doing it, but it took a long time, and I don't know. I guess I'm lazy.
I don't think that people would think this, but it's a task to do that. And especially when you have to, lay them all out in piles, walking around in a circle, laying them all out in piles and folding them and stapling them. My shoulders get sore. I like my neck gets sore. I also get really nervous the closer to something is being finished. But when I did the Atomic Elbow, I thought, I think I'm going to do this the way Robert does it. And then I just didn't, because I went with what I knew. But yeah, I don't blame anybody that doesn't do it that way. In fact, you're creating less waste than I would, because inevitably there's paper scrap going in the recycling when I do it.
Well, when I did 53, which was 10 years ago, or maybe even more, it's been a while, but I did 53, which was a zine a week for a year. And originally, the project was going to be called 52, and I was going to do a zine a week for a year. And that was the same time DC Comics launched their line the first time, called 52, where they were going to do this thing for us. So I was like, well, I'm better than them, so I'm going to do 53. And I wound up, I think, doing 55 issues. But anyway, doing a cut and paste hand layout zine every week for a year.
Oof.
Really. And they were only 8 pages, they weren't huge. It wasn't like multiple pieces of paper. Each zine was, each photocopy was one piece of paper front and back. You cut that in half and staple it so you have an 8-page zine. but I did a lot of work by hand with that, with folders and files of clip art and press on letters and things like that. And it just gets to be very fiddly and tedious. And so when I decided to get serious about doing another zine and started the Atomic Elbow, it was like, well, I could do all of this on a computer, and I would like to try that because I don't want to be in Kinko's at 3 a.m. with press on type anymore. So
how about publishing online or in PDF form?
Boy, there are things that shouldn't be online, and I don't think the Atomic Elbow is one of them. I'm not precious about my work. I don't think it's significant, and so I'm not saying this out of some sense of grandeur, but it's cool to have stuff that doesn't exist on the internet. And I know that I personally have a very difficult time reading anything longer than a couple of paragraphs on a computer screen. Mm-hmm. I can't. Mm-hmm. I've tried to do ebooks. I've tried to read comics on an iPad. I've tried, and it just doesn't hit for me. Mm-hmm. And so I've sold PDFs of the Atomic Elbow for, to raise money for different causes throughout the years. And that's kind of the honor system. I know that once those PDFs are out there, you could email them to anybody, and you have to be okay with that. I'm not trying to make money, but I think that there's a personal connection to even though you order it online, every issue of the Atomic Elbow that's ever been sold, I have put it in the envelope. I've written your name on the envelope. I've thrown stupid stickers and trading cards in there. So there's a personal connection to that I think would be missing with a PDF download.
Yep. I couldn't say it better. Yeah, I agree with you with that. Soda Killers type stuff. Save a one-off review for a website that nobody ever reads every now and then. I just don't think it's the kind of stuff that translates well to digital delivery. All right, so I have one more email here from Joe from East LA, and I have emailed back and forth with Joe over the years and traded zines at one point. He's a listener of my other show, Hot Dog Days Radio. He sends an email saying, your podcast with Robert is good. Both episodes so far. So this is an older one. I do have some criticisms to share, though. Please, no more post shout at the devil Motley Crue references. That shit was embarrassing. Your mention of girls, girls, girls is one too many. But then again, one of you complimented Poison. So what am I going to do? Cancel the light metal. And that's Joe in East LA. Well, Joe, I happen to like Motley Crue quite a bit up through Dr. Feelgood. After that, I couldn't really tell you much. I didn't listen to the John Corabi thing, and I didn't listen to anything since then.
Apologies to Joe, but the John Corabi record has 2 really good songs on it. I cannot remember what they're called. It's not Hooligan's Holiday, but that John Corabi record, I will not defend, but I will defend portions of it because I think they're valid.
Were you a Motley Crue fan prior to this? Prior to the John Corabi stuff?
Oh yeah. I came on board, I guess, Theater of Pain, probably.
Yeah, same.
And then went backwards, because this is before. So I guess I'm disappointing Joe all around. But I think there's validity to it. The interesting thing to me about Joe's criticism, and I do think it's valid, is that if you don't think of these artists as heavy metal, I think it helps. They're not heavy metal. They are to heavy metal as, say, the Banana Splits or the Bay City Rollers were to the Rolling Stones. They're bubblegum pop. That's what they are. They're the Lemon Pipers. They're the 1910 Fruit Gum Company. There's no difference. It's just bubblegum pop, and there's a lot of really great stuff There's good songwriting in, like the Joey Levine bubblegum stuff that was on like the whole Buddha record scene in the 60s. That stuff was great, but at the time it was viewed as just disposable, throwaway jingles. And I think that there's an analogy to quote unquote light metal, which is really just pop music. Because the people in Sodom weren't threatened by, Winger. If you compare Slayer to Badlands, it's not even the same. So maybe it would help that when we start to talk about Poison or Motley Crue or Shark Island, don't think of it as heavy metal. Just think of it as pop music. I would also make the case that Lynyrd Skynyrd, and I don't know how you feel about them one way or the other, but Gimme 3 Steps is the best bubblegum pop song ever written.
There you go, Joe, in East LA. Thanks for the email. We appreciate it. You can email me if you'd like about the show at thee.n.o.b@gmail.com, or you could email Robert at a less confusing email, which is...
It is second period, SECONDPERIOD, @gmail.com.
Yeah, and please do. I like it. It's cool to hear from you and be asked questions. That helps us along and work all this stuff out. We're going to take a slight break here, and then we're going to get to the part that we normally open the show with, where we pick a song and spiral out of control from there. Here's Motley Crue.
I think the opening riff to Kickstart My Heart
it's great.
Is towering. Like it should be carved into granite and put in front of a courthouse.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Now we're going to start the part of the show that we've sort of based this whole thing around. We pick a song, and then we talk about where we maybe first heard that song or memories of the genre or whatever, and sort of see where it goes from there. Robert, do you want to introduce this song?
So this is a song from 1950, because as I said to Nathan earlier today, we really don't do a lot of modern stuff, and so let's really reverse course on that and do a song that's 70 years old. But this is Lefty Frizell's "If You've Got the Money, I've Got the Time." It's his first single, and it is one of the first songs I remember hearing.
If you got the money, I've got the time. We'll go honky-tonkin' and we'll have a time. We'll make all the night spots, dance, drink beer and wine. If you got the money, honey, I've got the time. Let's start out tonight. We'll spread joy, oh boy, and we'll spread it right. We'll have more fun, baby, all the way down the line. If you got the money, honey, I've got the time. Leave more wreck behind. If you got the money, honey, I've got the time. Yes, we'll go honky-tonk and make every club in town. We'll go to the park where it's dark, we won't fool around. But if you run short of money, I'll run short of time. 'Cause you with no more money, honey, I've no more time. All the night spots, dance, drink beer and wine. If you got the money, honey, I've got the time.
All right, welcome back to Relatin Dudes To Jazz. That was Lefty Frizell. If you've got the money, I've got the time. And as Robert mentioned, that song is 70 years old. Neither of us are 70. I mean, close.
We're closer to that than we are to other. Oh boy.
0. What's your memory of this song?
So this is a song that was incredibly popular, and it was huge in the early 50s when, Lefty Frizzell recorded this. This song was everywhere. I've read a couple of books about Lefty, and he was a white country singer in 1950, so there are going to be a lot of problems with his personal life that we're just going to gloss over on this episode. But I do recommend, there's a couple of biographies of Lefty Frizzell that are out there, and I can't remember who wrote the main one, but it's worth reading. He had an interesting life, even though he did some things that weren't the best, and he might not have been the greatest guy. Yeah, so I remember this song very specifically because my grandmother used to sing this kind of to herself under her breath as she was walking around the house just doing stuff. And it was the first time I remember, and I'm sure there were other instances of this, but it was the first time I remember a member of my family being into music in that way, that they carried it with them when they weren't specifically listening to it. And they would sort of sing this to themselves while she was washing dishes or bringing in firewood or whatever. And it really stuck with me. And my grandmother and I used to sit when I would spend summers with her. She lived way out in the woods, far from, in a little town outside of the town called Raytown, Georgia, which I think has 5 people who live in it. And so there would be nothing to do there. And we would just listen to the radio. And there was a country station that came out of Washington, Georgia. And whenever these older country songs from the 50s and 60s would come on, my grandmother's face would just light up. And that was the first time I remember seeing that reaction to music in somebody else. And it was the first time I remember somebody sort of sharing their affection for a specific kind of music or a specific song with me in that way. And so this is the song of all the ones that were favorites of hers. This is, I think, the one that stuck with me the most because, and this is revisionist. Grandma's been gone for a long time, but this is the one that I think I remember her being into the most. And the popularity of the song kind of plays that out because it was an incredibly popular song in 1950. So if any of you were around back then, I'm sure you remember that.
Very cool. I know I've heard numerous covers of this song, and I can't remember the first time I ever heard it, but if I had to guess, it would have been on the radio, public radio station out of Grand Rapids in northern Minnesota that my mom worked at called KAXE. It's still around today. And they had this show on Sunday mornings called Back Porch Harmony that played all of this type of music, bluegrass, like the era that this is from, a lot of this kind of stuff. And so likely that is where I first heard this song. One of the hosts of the show was this guy named Lauren, and he's not with us any longer. I can't remember his last name, and I don't want to try and guess to disrespect him or anything, but he was actually kind of a family friend too because his brother lived down the road from us.
I think that it's important also to realize that this song was so huge that Lefty Frizzell went back to it multiple times in his career. There's a set of Bear Family, which is a German record label, is sort of known for doing these extensive and kind of lavish box sets of everything that certain country and rockabilly artists have ever recorded. And they did a set a few years back called Life's Like Poetry, which was everything that Lefty Frizzell had ever recorded in his entire career. And it was, I think, 11 CDs and a hardbound book and everything. And on that set, If You've Got the Money, I've Got the Time shows up, I think something like 12 or 15 times. I mean, it's just, he kept going back to that well. And a lot of these country artists that had careers from, the 50s through the 70s and 80s would go back to their older songs for rights reasons or to try to re-release them and get a new audience for them. So that's not unusual, but I think the sheer volume of times that Lefty Frizzell went back to this and even recorded another version of the song called You've Got No More Money, I've Got No More Time. So there's something about money and time that was lost. But I think that it's interesting to think about this not just as a song that my grandmother liked, but as a cultural phenomenon that was, sort of number one on the country charts forever and on the charts. And this is a song that in the early 50s, everybody knew. And that sort of transient nature of those sort of things is interesting to me because now it's not that well known because not a lot of people, are into early 50s country music, and that's okay. That's fine. That's the way it should be. But I would say if I was pressed on it, Lefty Frizzell is probably one of my favorite musical artists. Maybe even my absolute favorite. Although as I say that, I'm thinking of some that maybe, more or less up or down, but he's circling around the top spot.
Cool. More than Iron Maiden.
More than Iron Maiden.
That story about your grandmother and those memories, that's really endearing. And I guess, it brings about a fondness for me too, especially, I guess, just more so for like old timey radio though, for like listening to that show on Sunday mornings while my mom was making breakfast, or, I was reading comic books down by the fire in the winter or something like that. So the sound in general, I do have sort of a fondness for. Do you remember that time in the 90s when it was very popular for people to say like, well, I don't like country music except for, Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings, or very similar to the I don't like rap music except for Tribe Called Quest and the Beastie Boys?
Yeah. Well, I've always heard I like all kinds of music except rap and country.
Right.
Which is a really interesting way to say I don't like art made by poor people. But I don't hear that as often, and I think it's because country music has sort of become popular in a way that it's always been popular, but now it's popular in a way that is acceptable to people who aren't of that scene. Like punks listen to country, rap artists listen to country, jazz artists listen to country. And so people who are primarily working in all genres of music, it's now, I guess it's okay to like country. And I'm not saying that in this disdainful sort of, oh, it's popular now and I was into it before it was popular. I think it's great that it's popular. And I don't care when you got into it, because this music is amazing. And so I think that there's this cultural reevaluation, to go back to the earlier part of the show. There has been a reevaluation popularly of this kind of music, of this sort of country music that came out of folk and blues and ballad traditions. And there has been a reevaluation of it. It just took, it just took 70 years or more, really, because I'm not saying that country started in the early 50s, but this song did.
One of the things that my friends and I would say probably pretty regularly back in the day was that I like most types of music except country, and except like classical. Later, I grew to appreciate country music, and I still do. I'm just not real schooled on it. I'm not real smart about it. I do think you're right. It's really popular, like country music, or at least, hot country or radio country and hip hop are the two biggest genres of music right now. I remember when the Garth Brooks thing happened, and just having absolute disdain for people that showed up to high school in cowboy hats and cowboy boots. It was like the absolute opposite of what I was into in life. And I couldn't believe that this stuff was becoming like part of popular culture. And in a way, I still have a hard time with it, I guess. Now, you're a Garth fan, right?
Absolutely. Garth Brooks is great.
I think I appreciate him much more now than I did when I was too young to appreciate it. I just couldn't like I can tolerate some shit, but you're telling me that like people like country music now, and that was also the same time as Miley Cyrus's dad.
Oh yeah, Billy Ray Cyrus.
Yeah, Achy Breaky Heart. Was that him?
That's him.
Okay, yeah. And so I thought it was all incredibly goofy for one thing, but I guess we were seeing probably the most outlandish acts of the genre at the time because they were getting the most press or whatever. But I appreciate Garth a little bit now.
He's one of the best-selling artists in history. Can't argue with numbers.
Did you ever wear a cowboy hat?
I never did. I don't look good in hats. No, I never wore a cowboy hat. I don't know that I've ever owned a cowboy hat except as maybe a joke, but definitely not a day-to-day wear. I did have a pair of cowboy boots when I was a kid.
Me too.
I mean, I think everybody did, but
Yeah.
I think that was more a Dukes of Hazzard thing than just a cowboy. I don't know. Cowboy hats aren't that much of a thing in Georgia. It's just camouflage baseball hats pulled down real low.
Yeah, I know that look too.
What you get?
I also have the tight curved bill camouflage hat for when I need it.
Yeah, I have one that my dad gave me, and it's from a tractor rental place in Conyers.
Awesome. Awesome. There was a period of time, actually predating like the Garth Brooks explosion at the school I went to, at the high school I went to, Big Fork, Minnesota, where because it was such a small town and everybody mostly lived in the rural part of the community, except for maybe 300 people that lived in the city. And an exposure at that time in the late 80s and early 90s, as we've talked about, there was no internet or anything like that. So exposure to the outside world was very limited. It was mostly what came over the radio or what you saw in magazines, or if one of your friends maybe had cable and had MTV. But so everybody would try to do things to be different. And even like quote unquote jocks would try like things to stand out a little bit and be different. And I remember there was a period of time where one kid introduced cowboy boots, and he had a pair of snakeskin boots, and he started calling them Goots, like Goots. And then it's sort of, he was like the point guard on the basketball team. He was very good looking. He's very popular. And so everybody kind of like, there was this brief time period like, I'm getting cowboy boots too. I'm getting Goots too. And everybody, there was like, 10 kids walking around school with Goots. None of them were listening to country radio or anything like that. They were probably listening to Poison, actually, or Guns N' Roses, who wore cowboy boots.
Did any of them wear those color block button-up shirts like Garth Brooks wore?
No, I don't. Now, I know exactly what you're talking about. Nobody at my school that I can recall. At a neighboring school in Deer River, Minnesota, where I went to school through like 6th grade, and if my mom hadn't married my stepdad, I would have kept going to school there. And I'm kind of really glad that I didn't, because I don't know if things would have gone different. I'd have to think that you are who you always are meant to be or whatever. But many of my friends that went to Deer River really got into the Garth Brooks and the country thing, and they did wear those shirts and cowboy boots and cowboy hats to like prom and stuff. And so I got to know these guys again later when we all went to the same college, and I was like, would flip through the yearbooks, their old yearbooks, to see what like my friends were up to while I was off at this other school with my new friends. And I was like, wait a minute, dudes, like you guys were into this stuff, and like, could have I thought, yeah, I think country music's my thing. Oh man, I can't imagine I would have, but who knows?
Did your high school have a talent show?
Kinda.
Was the talent show won by someone singing a Garth Brooks song?
Right. There was a girl, Lisa, last name redacted, did the Garth Brooks song, "Friends in Low Places." She lip synced that for the talent show. I don't remember where she placed in the standings, but there was only like 3 acts, so she was in the top 3. We had like somebody did like "Thunderstruck" by ACDC. I think the same group of kids did that 2 years in a row. Many years before that, somebody did the Georgia Satellites, that song about ain't got no, a little money in
the
pocket,
hands to yourself.
Jangle, jangle.
Yeah, keep your hands to yourself.
Right. Oh my God. Talent show. Did you have a talent show at your school?
We did, and it was won by a young man who sang a Garth Brooks song. And I was talking to a friend of mine at work, and she was telling me how at her high school, in her high school talent show, she and a friend of hers they both played guitar, and they played and sang a couple of songs, and they did very well, and everybody thought they should have won, but her high school talent show was won by a kid singing a Garth Brooks song.
That has got to be a study that somebody does. Go ahead.
I just think that in the 90s, most high school talent shows were, especially in rural areas, were won by people performing Garth Brooks songs.
Absolutely. That's so good. I would love some sort of hard research on that. I don't think you need it, though. I think we're absolutely right.
Yeah, I just want to say it's true. Hey, do y'all have the Garth Brooks billboards up there in Minnesota?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so we have these billboards around Athens. They're gone now, but they were up for almost a year. That was just a really tight shot of Garth Brooks' face with the cowboy hat on. I'm sure I can find a picture to send you. But anyway,
is this recent?
Yeah, this was last year.
Okay, so we may have, because he came here and did a couple of nights recently.
Well, what the billboards were for was racism. It was Garth Brooks, and then the words just said, "There's only one race, the human race," and then like something about like stop hatred or whatever. I don't know how it was phrased. It was way more eloquent than that. But Garth Brooks was on these anti-discrimination billboards, and I didn't know how universal that was. I didn't know how far out of the South that ad campaign made it.
I don't recall. I'll have to ask around.
Yeah, I'm sure. Hey, did you see those Garth Brooks billboards?
Blame it all on my roots. I showed up in boots and ruined your black tie affair. Last one to know, last one to show. I was the last one you thought you'd see there. And I saw the surprise and the fear in his eyes, and I took his glass of champagne. I toasted you, said, honey, we may be through, and you'll never hear me complain. 'Cause I got friends in low places where the whiskey drowns and the beer chases my blues away. I'll be okay. Yeah, I'm not big on social graces. Think I'll step on down to the oasis. So I've got friends in low places.
But you hold my mind, it might be walking out on me today. But don't tell my heart, my achy, breaky heart, I just don't think you'd understand. And if you tell my heart, my achy, breaky heart, he might blow up and kill this man. Don't tell my heart, my achy, breaky heart, I just don't think you'd understand. And if you tell my heart, I got a little change in my pocket, going jingle-lang-a-lang. Won't you call you on the telephone, baby? I give you a ring, but each time we talk, I get the same old thing. Always no huggy, no kissy until I get a wedding ring. My honey, my baby, don't put my love upon no shelf. She said, don't hand me no lines and keep your hands to yourself.
Yeah.
We're going to do a skate report.
Do you want to do one? We can do one. I don't have much of one, but that's kind of one. So
I saw you building the deck.
I built the deck. I know that's why I put it on friends only, because it's like, it's sort of like, well, it is an old man kook deck, which is fine. That's what I was going for. I still feel weirdly like a poser, even though I can't help myself from talking about it or sharing it. It's strange.
Got me living in hell, lost in my brain. Got me thinking, come on, ready to explode. Dodge out my life, dodge out my problems, dodge out my life, my problems,
The skate report.
That makes it sound so official.
Robert and I are some old person skaters now. You got a skate report, Robert?
I have been skating a little bit since my knee stopped working back in August. Just a little bit here and there. Like I'll be driving home. I keep it in my car. And so I'll drive home from work and I'll pass a parking lot and I'll think, I should probably just get out there for 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And so I'll get out there and push around, but I'm not doing anything amazing. I think I almost landed an ollie over a curb in a parking lot the other day.
That's
like,
big.
I came so close. I think it was one of those where like I got up, but the tail of the board hit the curb and it gave it a little extra bounce. So I didn't get over it myself, but hitting the curb with the tail kind of pushed it up a little higher. And so I was able, but I didn't land. Mm-hmm. I mean, I did land, but I didn't land on the board.
I can't ollie up onto things. I can only do it off of things, which is easy because if you don't really ollie, you just ride off of it and hope that you land. But I'm having a hard time getting getting up onto things. That's one of my goals for this next year.
I can get up, but I can't do anything once I get there. And I can't figure out how people keep moving. Like if my trucks hit a curb, they stop dead. And I don't know if I'm like putting my weight in the wrong place or if I need to kind of like lift up a little bit or what. But if my deck or the trucks hit something, unless it's like really thickly red or yellow painted, they're stopping dead. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, I feel you. I've tumbled a few times in the same scenario. I don't get to skate really because it's I live in an area where it snows. So I skated every single day through the fall and early into the winter. And I skated a couple times while it was snowing. And the final day where I was like, I think I probably got to put it away until midwinter when things sort of start to melt a little and then you can shovel spots and the sun comes out and that dries it up and you get some asphalt to work with. That day it was snowing like flurries and I was the only one at the skate park and it was like serene. It felt really good to be out there, but it was also like, this is it, this is probably going to be it now for a little bit. It's been so much fun and I just feel like it has improved my life in so many ways. That's cheesy to say, but it feels really good. But I fell a bunch of times right at the end of the season, if you will, and I hurt my knees, and what I originally thought were bruises on my palms were bruises to the bones that lead down your wrist into your palms, and those take a really long time to heal. And so when the ground is like extra hard because it's cold, it's like, I don't know what I'm doing, man. Like maybe it's good to have sort of a season, if you will, and take a little break. But I've got around and done a little riding, but I am currently not saying I'm able to skate.
Have you thought about getting fingerless gloves?
Nope.
When I was a teen and I was skating a lot, I would wear these Santa Cruz fingerless gloves that I bought at the skate shop because I thought they made me look cool. And on closer inspection of photographs taken at the time, they did not. But I honestly had a lot working against me. But the Santa Cruz black fingerless gloves were not helping.
Yeah.
But the reason I bought them is because the church parking lot where I skated had this bank up. It was the pavement went up, and it's rare in the South to see a paved like blacktop at an angle. And I think that
Really?
happens. I think that happens in the northern states quite a bit, because when I watch skate videos, people in New York, Chicago, like will have concrete that goes up a bank, but there's usually a divider or a trench dug in there for drainage. But you see a lot of blacktop asphalt going up a bank, and there's not a lot of that around here, but there was at this church parking lot. And I could do the thing where you put your hand down and you slide the board up.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but I bought the fingerless gloves to protect my fragile palms when I did that one trick. And boy, did I think a lot of myself.
Yeah, no, I haven't thought about the fingerless gloves. We'll see what happens here. I'm really excited to get back out there, like for like real time.
I'm really excited to get you in some fingerless gloves.
Well, maybe we'll have to just do that. Here's the thing, though. I don't sing for a band, and I have this whole thing about like the fingerless glove is only for like a handful of people that sing in bands, and not everybody that can pull off the fingerless glove should. Including those that sing in the bands, which I don't do. So it's going to take a little bit of work, my friend, but we'll see what happens.
Can't wait to see how this plays out.
I did build a new deck the other night, a deck I'd had bought a couple months ago, and then I used some internet fake money to buy all the other components and put that together, and it felt really fun, and I can go back and forth in my basement on it. So I'm looking forward to getting out there with kind of a new setup too, which I think is going to maybe be kind of relearning all over again. The trucks are a little bit different, and I went with smaller.
Are they wider?
Wheels. Yeah, well, the board is wider, so I got a bigger board, so I got trucks to match. I like my trucks to be about the same width as the board, as go out as far as they can. So everything's a little bit bigger, yeah, but a little bit looser too, because I went with, so not the wheels, I went with smaller wheels than I had been riding. The trucks are a little bit looser. I know I could tighten those, but I also, with my board that I had been riding all summer and stuff, I couldn't really take very tight turns. So I'm looking forward to a little more mobility with this board, but also I think it's going to probably be a learning curve too, with like how quick the reaction time is versus. I
think you told me the deck that you got, and so that's like a 9. It's like a 9-inch wide, right? That's
it's
real
like
wide.
9 wide and 33 something long.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm using too, and I love it. I love that shape because it just, I don't know, it feels a lot more stable. And I'm probably limiting myself. I mean, I'm never going to land a kickflip anyway, but I assume it would be harder to do with this deck.
Right.
Yeah, it's so much fun. It's like driving like a big Buick,
Yeah.
It's a luxury car.
Well, I think it's like, it'll be cool to have like 2 setups too, and see how, go back and forth between them. I still feel like such a novice and a poser, even though like realistically, like I was doing this stuff like every day there, especially at the end. Like that doesn't make me like 100% skateboarder or anything like that. But every time that I feel sort of like, I'm still just like like a noob, like there's probably millions of people that roll their eyes when they hear me talk about this. But then I go, but no, I'm out there like trying to get better like every single day. And also really it makes me happy, and that's the most important thing. So I'm going to keep going till I can't.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I'm not good at all, and I never will be. And I'm 100% okay with that. As long as I'm just like pushing around a elementary school parking lot, and that's fine. Yep. I'll just go in circles for half an hour, and I really don't care.
What's the public perception on 40-some-year-old dads skating the paved banks at their son's preschool? Because I'm about there.
I have definitely been kicked out of places by people that are half my age.
All right, cool. Well, I think you about ready to call it on this?
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, we talked about the zines that we did several months back at the beginning of the show. Each of us has also put out a new issue of our respective zines. Robert has returned to the Atomic Elbow, and I have returned to Soda Killers magazine. You want to talk about yours a little bit? So
the new issue of the Atomic Elbow is out, and it's pretty good, I think. I mean, I don't want to throw too much hubris out there.
It's good,
but it concludes the Wayne McCarty article about WCW Comics that started in the issue that you edited. It's also got contributions from Scott Holland and Ben Welton writing. Ben wrote about some deathmatch wrestling and why he likes that sort of thing, and Scott Holland wrote kind of a more introspective piece than the straightforward wrestling stuff that he's done in past issues. And then I wrote a really, frankly, too long piece about WCW Starrcade 91, and it's great. It's worth reading, I think. I don't know.
Definitely. It's good. It's really good.
And you also have a new issue of Soda Killers out, if I'm correct.
Yes, number 25. You can go to hotdogdays.bigcartel.com to find that. This one, I decided to publish some reader mail that had sort of been stacking up over the years. I've got tons. I could have probably done a whole issue of reader mail, but that would also be a little boring. Jesse Mack wrote about he created the ultimate oddball holiday mixtape. So he wrote about all these songs that he'd put on a Christmas mixtape, and then he actually created a playlist that you can find on YouTube to go along with it. So that's in there. Aaron Hiscock wrote a nostalgic piece about human connections through music and sort of memories of her mother. Clell Miller, also many people probably know, is Luke Sick, the rapper and the head of Mega Cut Records. He wrote the second part of his Cop Rap Now, which has turned out to be going to be an ongoing column in which he reviews rap music released on physical media like tapes and CDs and records. And Lars the Heathen, an old friend of mine, wrote a thing. Lars is a very strange man, and very strange person, and I think their piece speaks to that. And then I wrote some things, some record reviews and some jazz stuff, and yeah, it's cool. I think you'll dig it. It's
I think it's very good. I read it in a tent.
Oh, you did?
You do not have to read it in a tent, but that's where I read my
highly
copy.
Recommended, though.
Yeah, if you got a tent, if you can get in a tent, definitely enhances the whole thing.
Awesome. Well, this is great. It's been far too long, and we should try and do it monthly if we can.
I would love to.
Okay, me too. All right, everybody, thanks a lot for listening. Robert, you're going to play us out with one more?
Yeah, so this is a song by Lefty Frizell, and it's called If You Can Spare the Time, I Won't Miss the Money. This
Perfect.
is the opposite version that I was trying to think of earlier.
Perfect. All right, take care.
Bye.
If you got the time, honey, I've got lots of bowling money, and I'll lay the cash right on the line. We'll go honky-tonkin', baby, and have a lot of fun, and I don't mean maybe. I've got the money if you can spare the time. Not do things that we had in order and make every nightclub down the line. Just as long as we've got gasoline, my Cadillac and lots of green, I've got the money if you can spare the time. We may drive down to Nebraska, maybe wind up in Alaska. I'm just a money-spending kind. 'Cause when it comes to spending dough, I'm just a guy you ought to know. I've got the money if you can spare the time. If you got the time, honey, I've got lots of fooling money. I'm making dough and doing fine. Just as long as you will help me spend it, everything will be just splendid. But I'll quit spending money when you run out of time.
Oh, I'm going to stop this recording.